All right. Hi, everyone. So our presentation is going to be on systems theory. Um, so yeah, I hope you guys like it. Go ahead and go to the next slide.
A little history about systems theory. It was developed by a man named Yuri Bronfenbrenner. And he developed this theory to kind of resemble Albert Bandura's social learning theory and Lev Vygotsky's social cultural theory. When he was creating this theory, he divided it into 5 different categories and ordered them based off the impact that they would have on the individual. Next. So what is systems theory? Systems theory is also known as social systems theory. It is the study of society as a complex arrangement of elements, including individuals and their beliefs as they relate to a whole. This means that when a social worker seeks to examine an individual from a holistic level, they look at how the smaller systems affect the more complex systems and determine that one cannot explain or rationalize one system without looking at all the others as a whole.
So for the overview of systems theory, to help gain like a better perspective of it, we went ahead and we found this little cartoon video, which I believe helps us understand it a little bit more. So we're going to go ahead and play that now.
In 1964, a young psychologist appeared before the US Congress with a mission. It was a time when most people thought that the reason poor people stayed poor was a matter of biology and had nothing to do with the environment they grew up in. The psychologist, Yuri Bronfenbrenner, wanted to change that and convince the world that to help those less fortunate, we also needed to change their surroundings. But did he succeed? Bronfenbrenner's ecological system theory conceives that a child is influenced by 5 ecological forces. First comes the microsystem of family and friends that affect the child directly. Second are the forces of the connections between the people around the child, parents with teachers and teachers with peers. Then there are links between social settings that do not directly involve the child, such as the father with his boss, the peers with their parents, and the teacher with the principal. Next is the overarching culture, religion, and social norms that influences all others. And lastly, there is time, which changes everything over the course of one's life. Children are born into a microsystem that influences the child's experiences directly. Children from unfortunate backgrounds are more likely to experience problematic family structures, even if it's simply for the fact that parenting is more difficult if you are poor. They also encounter more negative situations at school or bad influences through friends. Consequently, a child that grows up in a negative microsystem will find it hard to succeed. The mesosystem represents the interconnections between the elements that surround the child. For example, the relationship between the father and the school teachers. If the father doesn't get along with a teacher, the child might suffer. The exosystem involves the links between social settings that do not involve the child. For example, a child's experience at home can be influenced by their parents' experiences at work. If the mother loses her job, there might be more arguments with the father, resulting in changes in their interaction with the child. The macrosystem describes the overarching culture that influences all other systems, such as a child's geographic location and ethnicity. Intelligent people who happen to live in bad places are more likely to move to better ones, but that also means that they are more likely to be strangers in a richer society. So, regardless of the child's biological potential or upbringing, on a macro level, he or she may still be at a disadvantage. The chronosystem refers to changes in the child and the environment over time. As the child grows up, the parents may stop loving each other and divorce, which can be traumatic for an 8-year-old boy. 5 years later, he may have come to terms with how things turned out. But when the boy turns 16, his mom's new boyfriend moves into their tiny apartment, and things get difficult again. Bronfenbrenner, who was influenced by Lev Vygotsky and Kurt Lewin, convinced the US Congress that a child's prospect is not genetically predestined, but is the result of the larger environment they happen to be placed in. Children who grow up in unfortunate social structures, therefore, need a form of support that not only reaches their families, but also elements of their community. Bronfenbrenner's theory helped form the Head Start program in 1965, a government program that has served more than 35 million poor children since. Decades later, Bronfenbrenner and Stephen Sessi proposed an extension of this theory, called the bioecological model. This new model recognizes gene-environment interactions and acknowledges the role of heritability, but adds that genes themselves are under the influence of the environment. In other words, the process of heritability varies in a magnitude of potentials. How much a child can make of the potential they inherit depends on the ecological environment. Bronfenbrenner made a critical contribution to our realization that parent-child relationships do not exist in a social vacuum, but are embedded in the larger structures such as community, society, and culture. In order to develop well, he allegedly said, "Every child needs at least one adult who is irrationally crazy about him or her." Now it's your turn. Make 5 circles, draw yourself in the center, and add a timeline at the bottom. Then put all the people, institutions, and forces that affect you through the 5 different systems. On the timeline below, you can add some major events from the past and those you expect in the future. Can you tell how the 5 forces are shaping your life? To read more about the topic or download the video without background music, visit sproutschools.com.
All right, so with the systems theory, it is used to understand things such as child abuse, family problems, community issues as they correlate to the personal issue of the individual. In the field of social work, systems theory uses a holistic approach to gain a better understanding into the factors that could be playing as a part in their disciplines. As it applies to social science, systems theory is crucial because it looks holistically at the individual to draw insights and use them to take steps forward. A perfect example of systems theory comes in the form of a case study that was conducted on a 15-year-old adolescent who was engaging in risky behavior. Throughout the case study, it was found that the individual's father had left their life 5 years prior, with her earliest memory of him involving drug use, along with him arguing with her mother. This led the individual to use drugs to self-medicate by using drugs whenever something in their life went wrong, and also built a poor social model for relationships that lacked any form of emotional support.
The 5 systems that he describes are microsystems, mesosystems, exosystems, macrosystem, and chronosystem. Microsystem are things that have direct contact with the individual in their immediate environment. Mesosystem is the interaction between the individual's microsystem. Exosystem incorporates other formal and informal social structures, which do not themselves contain the child, but indirectly influence them as they affect one of the microsystems. Macrosystems is how cultural elements affect the individual's development, and chronosystem is the system that consists of all the environmental changes that occur over the lifetime of an individual throughout their development, including major life transitions and historical events.
All right, here is a chart. Hold on. Oh, okay. Here is a chart of systems theory that this was also kind of shown in that video that we watched. And it's kind of a cool resource to have, like when you're working with clients, to put the client in the middle and then kind of branch out the various systems that affect the individual. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so to apply this theory, we are going to look at the character Rose from the movie Titanic. So first thing we'll do is just look at her as an individual. Rose is a healthy young woman. Her family has recently lost their fortune, and she has to be married to a wealthy man who does not value her opinions. She is currently living on the Titanic while en route to the United States to pursue a new life of comfort with her fiance and mother. So that's just kind of like her base situation there. When we look at her microsystem, we look at her inner circle, and we are looking at her microsystem and all of her ecological systems based on her residency on the Titanic. So her inner circle that we know of would be her mother, her fiance, her friends on the Titanic, and eventually she comes to know Jack Dawson. She is living on the Titanic among upper class passengers. She attends church services on the ship. She attends scheduled dinners and social hours with other upper class women on the ship. Looking at her mesosystem, how her microsystem interacts with other systems. Very nuts there. Rose's interaction between her microsystem and exosystem have her feeling depressed. Her mother is using her as a pawn to remain in first-class society. Her fiance is marrying her for her namesake. She does not agree with first-class society's cultural demands on women, and she struggles to feel like she fits in. She meets Jack and must hide her relationship with him and his third-class friends because it's not a culturally acceptable relationship. Looking at her exosystem, the community that Rose belongs to is the first-class community on the Titanic. The Titanic is broken into class systems consisting of first class, second class, and third class. Each class has its own culture area on the ship and provided accommodations. There is also a division between men and women and their associated roles in society. Men make the money and women marry into money. So we selected this picture too of the Titanic because you can see like the different classes boarding onto different areas of the ship. So the upper class literally was like on the upper decks and it moved down depending on the class system that you were in. So that was a big part of Rose's exosystem. In her macro system, all the systems that Rose interacts with are heavily influenced by the culture of the time that she lives in. One of the main influences are the societal roles on men and women. Rose has desires to go and live an exciting life, but society tells her that she must marry into a wealthy family to save her family's name and restore their wealth. Rose's macro system their emphasis on class and gender also influence her when the Titanic is sinking, and only women and children are allowed onto the lifeboats with first-class passengers boarding the boats first. Rose's relationship with Jack breaks societal norms that regulate her microsystem. By stepping out of those norms, she disrupts the balance that exists in all her ecosystems. So we see when she starts spending time with him that all her other relationships kind of get out of balance. And then looking at her chronosystem, which would be the effect of all her systems over a period of time, we can look at her whole life here. The effects of the Titanic have left Rose with a hole in her heart. While she moved on from Jack and remarried to have children with her husband, she held on to the memory of that tragic day and the necklace that she was gifted by someone who was to be her husband. Meeting Jack and living through the events of the Titanic gave Rose the courage to live her life on her own terms. She would then marry for love and not obligation to her family. So we can see that when the Titanic sank, all of her ecosystems were left out of balance, and it kind of served as a catalyst for Rose to redefine her life over time.
Some weaknesses that we found of systems theory include the approach to an individual's issue might not always explain what the individual is going through at that time or the circumstances surrounding them. And another issue was that sometimes finding solutions to an individual's problem can be very hard, especially at the cultural and policy level. Systems theory is extremely broad in scope and can be difficult to apply. And as a summary, systems theory is essential in the advancement of our society. By examining all the moving parts, we will gain a better understanding of an individual as a whole and how they operate.
Okay, and that is all. Thank you. Hold on.